Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to On the Mic with Mike. We are the premier business radio program in the area. I'm the host, Mike King. I appreciate you being here with us. So we always talk to, this is a business show, and we talk to all facets of the business community. So a couple weeks ago, we met Layson Barton, who was here. She came to the program. We met at Better Business Bureau office. Shout out to my man, Barry Moore, who is out there doing great things. And he told me about this lady, and she said, all right, so we talked to her. And I said, I got to come out to the funeral home. So what happens? I'm a man of my word. We are here at Woody's Funeral Home. Welcome to the program, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
All righty. So I always say this is a business show. Let's start off who you are and what you do.
My name is Kyrstina Diman, and I am the manager at Woody Funeral Home for our Parham location, our Parham Road location.
All righty. So give our listeners an idea what that entails. As I said before we started, we all know the funeral process when it happens. It's kind of a devastating time for people. But what you got to do is personalize it, and you make it part of a going home ceremony, whatever you want to call it. But you put a personalized touch to it and guide people through a very difficult time in their life.
That's absolutely true. We, funerals are not just a day in your lifetime. They are your whole lifetime in a day. So we.
Oh, I like that.
Our staff specializes, they're specially trained to guide families through celebrating that whole lifetime for their loved one and making sure that that's personal and meaningful to them.
And so you've been doing this for a long time. The idea of it is that we survived COVID. Back in the day, having remote services was it wasn't the norm. Is it more, obviously it's more accepted now than it was in the past. Can we talk a little bit about what that meant to the industry as well?
Yes, so our industry, COVID kind of spearheaded a lot of different things and a lot of changes very rapidly for funeral homes across the country. And one of, I think, the best things that came out of COVID was funeral homes had to learn very quickly how to utilize technology just very, very quickly to be able to have their family members present. At one point in time, we were only allowed to have 10 people to a service, and that's so detrimental to a family's healing and support. So being able to have their family tuned in wirelessly via Zoom or live streaming or whatever it may be, aided very much during the pandemic. And so that's kind of stuck around, and I don't see that going away. Families have become very comfortable with that, and they know that that's a resource that's available to them. It works well if, we have transient families all over the place, and military service members overseas, they're able to attend funeral services and be there virtually.
All righty, ma'am. We both were part of that tribe called Uncle Sam's Army. So when Layson was and I talked to her about females and women in mortuary services, as I said, I spent a lot of years in the Army, and I was a medic. I'm sure I encountered some folks in mortuary services. I did see them, but never had the real interaction with them. Let's talk about your journey from hometown to mortuary services and one of the reasons it was a great story of how you got into it.
Sure.
Let's let the listeners know about that.
Sure thing. So I am originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I joined the military when I was 17, and in 2006 went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for boot camp, and then AIT at Fort Lee for mortuary affairs. When I spoke to the recruiter, I didn't want to do mortuary affairs at first. It wasn't my first choice. But military policing was what I wanted. That was my original MOS that I was interested in. But that was closed for active duty at the time that I joined. So I told the recruiter, just give me a list of all the things. Just give me all the jobs that I can
do. And he gave you two of the most popular ones.
Oh, yes. Mortuary affairs and petroleum supply truck driving were the two that stuck out to me. And I was like, well, I don't want to drive a bomb overseas. So mortuary affairs sounds interesting. And I asked the recruiter, I said, well, that's like CSI. And he said,
Of
absolutely.
course, yes, of
Yes,
course,
that's what
yes.
it is. It was
Check.
nothing like that. But I'm glad that I did it. I lost my sister when I was young, and my parents being protective and young themselves, not knowing how to explain childhood death to a child. They kind of shielded me from her whole funeral service. So subconsciously, I believe that divine intervention got me to mortuary affairs in the Army. And then I deployed to Iraq. And based on some things that happened over there and some things that I encountered, I got out and wanted to do this stateside to be able to help families.
So when we've been in the Army, we've seen things that you're never normal after the things that we see. And so we're going 100 miles an hour. It doesn't matter what the military service is, GIs for GIs. And then you get out from that, and then you have to try and live your life normal, trying to not to remember the things that you had sort of impacted you in a very big way. So when you get out, you take some of those ideas and then you come over to it in a civilian world. What's the difference that you see between doing it in the military and then coming out into a civilian world?
So the biggest thing is trauma. Trauma was a big one in my job specifically. The types of trauma that loved ones encounter in the military is very different than some trauma that we see stateside. That's the biggest difference as far as care for that loved one, care for that family. In the military, mortuary affairs doesn't have a whole lot of interaction with the family. That's usually casualty affairs that handles that. We are more so with the soldier that passed away. And so stateside, it's flip-flopped. We have both. So we're caring for the decedent who passed away as well as their family. But more so my job now is more with the family side, but we have teams that still care for the decedents.
So, and how can people find information about Woody's out there?
So Layson is a good advocate. She's always, out speaking to people in the community. Our staff is in the community. We do outreach programs. We have, prearranging specialists that go out and talk to people and do seminars and things like that. So we're all over in the community, different events we try to be a part of and sponsor to get our name out there.
Because when you guys are needed, kind of is not like the time to come and find, because we are not in the right frame of mind. So we are engaging with you. Every time a person walks in the front door, it has to be perfect.
That's correct.
Because that's somebody's family member. Let's talk a little bit about okay, so you were going along and COVID hit, and it took everyone by storm. All of a sudden, people started realizing your industry, what did it do impacting you guys and holding the staff together and all those things while the numbers just keep rising and the restrictions on what you can do?
So that's a great question. Our staffs across the nation for everywhere were just taxed to the max. The death rates were rising and staff rates were staying the same or diminishing. So just being there to be a support for one another and know that you're in it together and everybody's going through it together was very beneficial. Having outings amongst the staff where we all can grab dinner together or having staff lunches, we would provide our staff, lunch, making sure they took breaks during the day. So that was on the staff side. On the family side, it was just traumatic to have to sit and try and guide these families with little to no support from their own family. When you're only allowed 10 people at a service, some families are more than 10 people, their immediate family members. So to be able to comfort them and be there, families really relied more on us to be that support because we were counted as one of the 10 that were allowed to be present.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, your role of caretaker and funeral director, you have the business side of things that you have to handle, but there's also a very human side to what we do, and that's the most important. And so having that role be amplified by COVID, families were just relying more emotionally on the funeral director, and you were becoming emotionally invested in every family that you serve. And not that you're not, but to a different level. You know, families usually have family to hug on them and love on them, and we're there to support them in that. But when they don't have that family, you become the sole person that's hugging on them and kind of guiding them. So that was a huge impact.
One of the great parts about having your radio show is, you know, asking all the questions. And so, like you said, there's the business side of it, and then there's the human aspect of it. To me now, it's just me as a layperson. It seems to be four parts of this. One part, a family member passes away, we got to contact the funeral home. We come here. Then we come back a second time to bring the documents that are needed, because we didn't know the first time, we were just frazzled. Then we bring the closing. That seems to be a big part of it. And then the actual day. But let's talk about the meaning and the needing for prearranging things so that we know what's happening, so we don't have to make those tough decisions at the worst time in our lives.
So prearranging, we are huge advocates on that for multitudes of reasons. One, back to the phone call and having to come, we try to limit that. We reach out to the families when someone passes, and we set your appointment and we go over things. We try to tell you at that time, these are the things that we're going to be asking you. Please bring these items with you. Now, not every family remembers that, because there's a lot that you're going through, and there's a lot that's going through your mind. In regards to prearranging, highly beneficial. One, for monetary reasons, you have the option to prepay for those services that you want, and lock in the rates for the date that you complete your prearrangement and make that payment. But more so than that, just to let your family know what it is that you want. It's so surprising. Even still, I've been doing this for about 18 years. And it's so surprising that even people that have prearrangements, they never tell their family about them. So making sure that your family knows that you have done a prearrangement, where to find those documents when the time comes, and it gives your family that peace of mind that you've already selected. It came right from you. There's no question. They don't have to, have guilt because did mom want this? Did dad want this? You made those arrangements, so it's clear cut. This is what I want, and this is how I want this carried out.
All righty. I mean, there's no question, because a lot of times we are, like you said, we don't even make the arrangements. And sometimes we make the arrangements and we don't let the folks know in the family. All righty. So one of the things, as you had said, when you were younger, your sibling passed away. Your parents want to protect you. So now you're the funeral director. You're taking everything into account. You're making people feel okay. You're the caregiver. What's it like when it goes off and they come back and say, well, you sure made mom look good, or so thank you for what you did for dad?
That is the best feeling in this job. Doing what we do day in and day out. Like you said, when you first got here, people don't usually call us until they need us.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, we know that it's not something that people want to talk about, and we understand that, but it's so incredibly important that they do. And so trying to be out in the community to educate people about having these conversations, talk about your lifetime. What do you want people to know? If you live to be 75 years old, you've done a lot in those 75 years, and people should know about that celebrate those things. Being the guiding light for families now, when they come back and that you've helped them, you can tell, you can feel it. It's not, oh, well, thank you for that. It's deeper than that. You can really see it on their face and their body language, and that's the best feeling in the world.
Is that when their service is over and they're leaving, or sometimes you see it when you're going through, like, okay, we're doing okay here?
Both. Sometimes some families, just they've got to get through the next thing, and they have to stay focused, and they don't, they're stoic, and they don't want.
Is that
to let
family
this-
culture sometimes, like
It
certain,
can be,
that's whole certain families.
yes.
Certain families can be stoic and then other families can be emotional.
That's absolutely true. Sometimes it's cultural, and sometimes it's just your background, things that you've dealt with in your life. Some people are just naturally more emotional, and some people are naturally more stoic. Military people are a little more stoic.
Yeah. It's about getting, like you
Yes.
said, okay, what do I need to bring? And when my wife's mother passed away, it's just like, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do?
Right, you're very
We
goal
put that
focused.
away and then we come back. That's the emotional side. The business side of it is,
I have tasks and I need to get them done.
and then you look up
And
and
then
okay,
you grieve later.
when it's over.
Correct.
So going back to the military aspect of it again, because Woody really supports the real military community and
Absolutely.
veterans. So you work at Dover.
I did.
Well, so for anyone who's been in the military who watches the news or anything, whenever a service member comes back, now I didn't know that was the only place they come to, which is Dover. That's a prestigious,
Absolutely.
duty station. Let's talk about what that meant and how that set your career up as you went forward.
So I spent some time in Dover before I deployed to Mosul. And that is the port mortuary for the entire armed forces. So all service branches go to Dover. So if you are killed overseas, it doesn't matter where, Afghanistan, Iraq, doesn't matter, you go to Dover. That is your first stop on the way to home. And so care for you is done in Dover. Overseas, common misconception is embalming is done over there. You don't have time. There's other things going on over there that you just wouldn't have the time
You
to
get
do.
our family member back to America
Correct.
as fast as we can.
Correct. Get them out of the war zone and into a green zone. Get them to Dover so that they can get the care that they need. And so when you get to Dover, there's a whole process and procedure that you go through. They measure you, you get your uniforms, casket selections, all of that is done at Dover. It is a very impressive facility that's there, and they are set up from start to finish to do everything that's needed. Casualty Affairs will contact the family, and the family actually has the option whether or not they want to be buried in Arlington, whether or not they want to be cremated. So the family does still get to pick where their loved one goes. Do they want to be buried in their home state, Minnesota, or wherever that may be, and then we facilitate getting them home.
Let's talk, since we talked about that, let's talk about Woody's commitment to that personnel or to the veteran community as a whole.
We are very committed to the military. We're committed to all of our families. The military personnel killed overseas. We have a first responder and line of duty program. They don't pay anything. So if you are killed overseas, or if you're a first responder, police, fire, your family does not pay anything for services that are selected. So we are very committed to first responders and military personnel and those families that are in service to others. We appreciate that, and we thank them for all that they do. And our way to give back is to have that program that their families won't pay anything.
All right, on the mic, Mike, we are here. So I talked to Lisa about this as well. The little kids who are out there, and maybe a little girl, and somebody said to you, "What do you do?" Ma'am?
What we do is we help and guide families to celebrate the lives of their loved ones when they've passed away. So we are the facilitators and the caretakers between families' wishes and seeing that they are carried out, and making sure that those services are memorable and meaningful and healing for the families left behind to cherish your memory.
And I guess opportunities for women in your field.
Oh, they thrive. So they're, and I'm not 100% sure of the actual statistic as of right now, but I believe it is roughly 60% of all mortuary school graduates are women. So it's changing. This profession is definitely making a switch and changing in lots of ways, but women coming through, women have a more compassionate side to them, and so they fit and they thrive in this profession.
I asked you this before, who takes care of the caregiver? Because what happened to you as a young person impacted you as an adult in your life going forward?
Absolutely.
Because the caregiver they don't stop.
No.
They know one speed.
Right. And compassion fatigue is a very real thing.
Yes.
And so that sometimes can get overlooked if you're not careful. So part of what us as funeral professionals are trained in, we keep an eye on one another. We know the signs of that because we're already looking for that in the families that we're serving. Are they suffering from compassion fatigue? They were the caregiver. Now that stops. Now they don't know what they're supposed to do. But when it relates to us, we already know those warning signs. We know what that looks like because we're looking at it in the families we're serving. So we can kind of take each other aside and say, hey, why don't we go get lunch, or why don't we take a break, or let's go golfing, or anything that kind of takes your mind away from that and gives you a rest and reprieve. And that may look different for everyone.
Alrighty, on the mic out here at Woody's Funeral Home. How can we find you one last time?
So we have pre-planning specialists that are out in the community. Our staff is out in the community. You can find us on our website here at our Parham location. It is woodyfuneralhomeparham.com. We have tons of information up there, or you can always stop by and say hi. It doesn't always
It's
have
not
to be a funeral.
You're right. It's not a scary place.
Absolutely.
It's not what sometimes people may think a funeral home looks like. It's a celebration. Like, really quickly, what are some of the cool things that you guys do to celebrate people's lives?
Oh, we've done all kinds of things. We've had motorcycles driven into our building. We have had, if they're into antique cars, we'll park them outside. We've had, golf equipment set up in here for the service. Whatever is meaningful to that person and whatever they enjoyed, their passions were. If they love the beach, we can bring sand in here and make the room reminiscent of those beach times that they had with their family. So the sky is the limit. Whatever your interests are, we have done it. Not much shocks me anymore. So
You've seen it all.
Oh, well, I don't know about
No,
all,
but you've seen enough of it to see.
I don't get surprised anymore. I tell families that I'm serving, the sky is the limit. As long as it is meaningful to you, we will make it happen. So if there's something that you're thinking of that seems out of the ordinary, let's do it.
When we were smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, when did you look up and say, okay, we're going to make it? Because I would think at first it was just like, we're just overwhelmed. You're just day to day to day. When did you look up and say, okay, we're going to be able to manage this thing right here?
So it was never really a question to me because I know we have the greatest team here and everybody is cohesive and we work together. Now that's not to say we didn't have rough patches and rough times, but everybody stepped in and did their part and we were there for one another. So I never really had, oh, we're not going to make it. It was very overwhelming at times. But I would say probably the past 6 to 8 months, it's slowed down with COVID quite a bit. Here and there, we still have some of that, but nothing like we were seeing a year and a half ago.
Does it seem like whatever that we talk about the new normal, does it seem like old times that we're coming up to now, that where we are now as opposed to 6, 8 months ago or a year ago?
Not entirely. I think because of COVID and the way that our whole profession had to shift very quickly, a lot of that has still stuck around. We still see families that are very apprehensive and very concerned and very COVID conscious. Not as much as we were seeing 6, 8 months ago, but it's still there.
Oh, I forgot to ask you about the culture part. So now, like I said, in Philadelphia, we had a viewing the night before, 6 to 8, kind of like that's it, go to the church or the funeral parlor tomorrow morning. Okay, we're there, then we go to the cemetery, boom, thanks, we're done, we're out. I go to New York with my wife, they're having viewing from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night. Just explain like the different cultures and how you guys are able to adapt and talk about and to serve families of all cultures.
So we are absolutely fluid. Whatever is healing for that family, whatever your custom and your ritual is, we can accommodate that. So we have a lot of the Buddhist community that will celebrate their loved ones here, and their culture looks very different than, say, a Jewish community member. So, and we handle those as well. So there is no, again, the sky is the limit. There is no boundary. We're just fluid, and whatever that family tells us that they need and how they want to celebrate and remember their loved one, we will accommodate that. So we have seen it where we have all day ceremonies and prayer services and rituals, and the family is attending the cremation ceremony. We allow that too. So whatever those needs specific to that family are, we will make sure that those happen.
There you go. On a mic with Mike, we are the best business radio program around. Why? Because we bring you information like this. Who else is going to come out to the funeral parlor and talk about not just the nuts and bolts of it, but really the compassionate side, like you said, the business side of it, and then there's the service side of it. When you were connecting with families, because you were sending people off in style and taking care of families along the way. So on a mic with Mike, pleasure. Thank you for coming on the program. You can follow us on ESPN Richmond 106.1 every day, 5 to 7 a.m. Choice 105.3 every day from 2 to 3, as well as International Business Code Radio. Please follow us. Make sure you support the funeral home here. We're doing some amazing things, not just here, but in the community as well.